Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Monday, May 18th, West Fargo City Commission meeting. First order of business is a Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me in a salute to our flag. I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Next order of business is item B, which is the approval of the agenda. We have an adjustment that we're going to make for the agenda this evening. On the regular agenda, items number 6 and number 8 will be moved to number 1 and number 2.
I would make a motion to approve.
All right, is there a second, please?
second.
It's been moved and seconded. Commissioner Jurdevig moved, Commissioner Olson seconded. It's been moved and seconded to the adjustment to the order of the agenda. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, gentlemen. Next order of business is the approval of the minutes. They have been distributed and have been in your packets. Is there any additions or corrections to the minutes as presented?
I'll make the motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Jurdevig seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of May 4th. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Next order of business is building permit report. It has been distributed and it is in the packets as an addendum. It came out later. Is there any discussion with regard to building permits?
I'd make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Jurdevig. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Who helped me with the second? Commissioner Olson did. Been moved and seconded to approve the building permit report as distributed. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next order of business is approve the following, the consent agenda, items A through D.
I'll move to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Simmons seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda as presented. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Motion passes. Moving on to the regular agenda. First item is item number 6 on the agenda has been moved to number 1. It's the second reading of the Wild's 20th final plot approval. Mr. Solberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to pull up just a map of the area on my screen here. So this is Wild's 20th edition. This was first brought to your attention on December 2nd of 2019. At that time, a public hearing was held and a first reading on zoning. During that time, we discussed the development, discussed the history a little bit of the Wilds as it has continued to progress. When we talked about that, I think we dwelled a little bit on the conditions of previous agreements at the Wild's 8th and Wild's 9th edition. We spoke a little bit about how the city of Horace is at the south end of this development. And you can see on the map here, excuse me, our city limits line is this yellow and black line that I'm kind of circling over. So the Wild south of 52nd encompasses all this area. And then the city of Horace is down here. We discussed at that time that there was a previous agreement that talked about how connection would take place from the Wild south to 64th. At that time, it was primarily for emergency access. Since then, there has been development of a new middle school and high school in Horace that brings areas of West Fargo south down through 9th Street, which is a collector, or Cheyenne Street to that middle school and high school. The requirements that were written into the past agreements state as follows: the developers will work with the city of Horace to establish a schedule for constructing the streets, which will be coordinated with the development of the Wilds development. If the city of Horace fails to make improvements to 78th Street South and 79th Street South, the developers may be responsible for the costs of developing rural section gravel roadways to ensure access to 64th Avenue South. So just to be clear, this is 64th that comes across, providing another connection to what we know as Cheyenne Street through Horace, I believe is County Road 17. So that's just a little bit of the background. Provide that to you just because I'm aware that that discussion may occur tonight. The plat, pretty typical plat. We are happy with the inclusion of some increased density and types of housing. That's consistent with our comprehensive plan, which talks about a mix of housing types and increased densities to increase the diversity of neighborhood housing stock. This is pointed toward our comp plan's action plan, big idea to strengthen neighborhoods and expand housing of choice. This has been sitting a little bit because there's some needs for the improvements along here. They have requested local improvements as well as continuing to construct 9th Street, which is a collector roadway, a regional asset to the neighborhood. We've gotten that request, and I believe Dustin will talk about that on the next item. Just a couple of items in addition to this. We did have some comment when we notified the public on this back when it was first at Planning Commission. One of the big concerns from this neighborhood, which is the Greyhawk subdivision, was that construction traffic comes in through Greyhawk quite a bit to turn around. So we'd want to ensure that this was maybe blocked off during construction of this, or some manner of construction planning was done. And when we talked about this at Planning Commission, it was felt appropriate that the city engineer kind of review that and come up with some ideas or plans to help alleviate any construction traffic coming into Greyhawk to avoid kind of destroying their roads during construction. Other than that, I don't have a whole lot to say about the development. I would say, though, that we are now at the Wilds 20th. This whole thing started with the Wilds 8th edition, and now we're at a point where I believe that a decision needs to be made as to what we do with this connection into Horace. As a city, we can't require another city to construct a road. We did have in a past agreement a requirement that the developer work with the city of Horace. So I'm interested to find out if there's any movement on that and how the commission would like us to move forward on our current agreement. The current agreement that we forwarded to the developer today really doesn't include any additional language. It's just continuation of what we've had in past agreements. So I'm open for any direction on that. With that, I'm available for any questions. I believe the developer is here as well. And there is no public hearing scheduled.
Thank you, Mr. Solberg. Are there any questions for Mr. Solberg? Commissioners, any questions?
I guess, like Tim said, I'm more interested in hearing from. I believe Jim or Tina, the Horace mayor, and one of the commissioners are online as well.
Excuse me. Thank you, Commissioner Simmons. I believe Brenton Hopler, the city administrator, is on right now. Corey Peterson, the commission president, will be on shortly. And Jim Bolus, the developer of the property, is also on right now.
So are there any updates then to the agreement? Or are there any, compromises or where are we at with that?
Commissioner Simmons, I can add that we did receive a letter written to Commission President Dardis and City Administrator Tina Fisk, I could sure go over that letter if you'd like the City of
I
Horace
guess,
to do that.
I think so. It's okay.
Certainly,
Mayor?
absolutely.
Okay. So the letter is, as I stated, written to President Dardis regarding the development of Wild's 20th. See, Horace is concerned that if the proposed development does not provide for a connection from 9th Street to 64th Avenue South, there will be a significant traffic increase through the Greyhawk addition in Horace. And that's the area that I was referring to regarding construction traffic. This is of concern because the increased traffic flows present a safety concern for residents of the Greyhawk addition and a structural concern to Horace staff, as these roads were not designed to handle the increased level of traffic. Staff from Horace and West Fargo have met on multiple occasions and once with the developer in an effort to resolve the issue. As a result of these meetings, Horace respectfully requests that the West Fargo Board of City Commissioners add a condition to plat approval requiring the developer to pay for costs to install a gravel road connecting 9th Street to 64th Avenue in Horace based on Horace's rural road section specifications, the width of 9th Street being paved in the Wild's 20th edition. This proposal was discussed with West Fargo staff and the developer and is similar to what has been done between Horace and the City of Fargo with the Deer Creek development. In that scenario, the City of Fargo required the developer to pay for Deer Creek Parkway, a asphalt street to be installed in Horace, which provides a connection to County Road 17. Here, Horace is requesting the developer pay for the cost to install a gravel road section. This connection provides several benefits, including a route for residents of the Wilds additions to drive south on 9th Street to 64th Avenue South, which runs east to County Road 17, leading to the new West Fargo Middle School and High School in Horace. If this connection is not installed, West Fargo residents will be forced to backtrack to 52nd Avenue to get to the new schools or drive through residential neighbors in Horace with roads not designed for this type of traffic. In addition, this connection provides access for emergency services from Horace to the Wild additions, which will be delayed if this connection is not installed. The Horace City Council and I urge you to consider approval of this condition before approving the final plan of Wild's 20th edition. Horace will then work with the developer regarding payment for the installation of this gravel road. Without this connection, there are serious concerns for Horace, including implications for both Horace and West Fargo residents. We look forward to your approval of this condition. We thank you for consideration. Sincerely, Corey Peterson, Mayor of Horace, North Dakota.
Mayor,
Yes,
I just have a question.
Commissioner Olson, excuse me.
Why do we have to make that a condition? Why does the city of West Fargo have to make that a condition to the final plat? It's not in our city. I'm just curious, why is that a condition that has to be met by, implied by us?
Great question.
Excellent question.
I don't believe that it does it? I think we put that language in there, did we not? To start with, Tim? Or, I mean, where did that, is this just coming from Horace?
So maybe I can chime in if it's okay, Mr. Commission President.
Mr. Shockley, certainly.
Historically, there was always a concern with connection between the two cities in that area. There was a concern about the amount of traffic that would occur from the Wilds development into Horace that was exacerbated by the development of a school in that area. I think that the goal has always been to have some type of connection. It just was unknown the specifics of what that connection would look like. The reason that the city of Horace is asking for the condition is that would be the only way that you could mandate the developer pay for some type of an improvement in Horace. Otherwise, Horace would have to undertake that development. So it's a decision that's up to the commission. I just wanted to give some history of why we got where we did. I think there's probably planning reasons why you'd want to have an exit into Horace, and I'd defer to Tim on the planning reasons.
I have a couple things, and Tim can get more detail. But back when the Wilds 8th was written, if you look at the verbiage, there were two roads that they had hoped that Horace would put in. We had talked with Horace, but at the time, we didn't get them to sign any agreements or anything. At that time, though, back when this was written, there were no plans for the schools to be down there. And so our initial plan was potentially a gravel road with a gate to cross and use it only if needed for emergency services. And and that was kind of our plan all along until recently, the last year or so, when the school moved. Then it became more of a concern for the city of Horace because they need connectivity in other areas as well. So there, and John is absolutely correct, but the school issue didn't start until long after that agreement was written.
So I'm not sure a commission meeting is the appropriate place for satire, but I will ask the question anyways, with that lead up. You know, with the schools and the development going into Horace right now, we know that we're going to have to continue to expand upon Cheyenne Street south of, all the way down to 52nd in the coming years. I'm just wondering if Horace is offering to pay for some of that, if we're paying for roads in their subdivision or in their city.
Thank you, Commissioner Jurdevig. There's Brenton. I'd call on Brenton, the city administrator from the city of Horace. Brenton, welcome.
Thank you. For Horace, what we were originally looking for is do a paved road, same width and everything. In talking with our mayor, we feel it's reasonable to ask for the gravel road. If the council wanted to pave that road or upsize it, then that would be brought to them for their consideration if they want to put additional costs into it. We're likely going to have costs tied to 64th, widening out 64th, improving that to be able to handle any traffic up front. And we're not asking the developer for that either. So our concern too stems on the traffic in the Greyhawk subdivision. Those roads are not built to handle a substantial amount of traffic. And we're afraid that if this was to be allowed, if that's not blocked off, we're going to have our roads in that subdivision are going to get beat up pretty bad. And we want to make sure that we're protecting that neighborhood from not having to invest in new roads long before they would originally be due.
Thank you, Brenton. Mr. Bullis, would you like to speak to this?
Thank you, Mayor. This has been going on for quite a while, and we're sensitive to the needs of the community as a whole, and we've agreed that hey, look, maybe we'll pay for part of this. I had suggested in earlier correspondence that maybe we escrow that money. I would prefer to do it with West Fargo so that if there are any other municipal matters that the two cities need to work out, we can do it all at once. And when Horace builds a road, give them the money. Our engineer sort of estimated on what this would cost, and I want to think he's reasonable at it, but I don't want to have my plat held up by having to build a road and trying to figure out how Horace and I are going to work together to build a road. We've been talking for over a year, I think, at this point, and we're on different pages, and I understand where they're coming from. And that's why I just suggested, look, let's escrow some money with the city, and if the cities can work this out, Horace can design their road any way they want it, and they can we'll offset the cost.
I'd rely on Mrs. Fisk or Mr. Shockley to respond to that. I have no experience with that type of arrangement, and I'd ask your guidance.
Well, Mr. Commission President, I can go first. We could, if that was the commission's direction, we could certainly establish an escrow fund. The devil is always in the detail about how much the cost of the road would be. We may have dueling opinions as to cost. I guess I'd probably want to have our city engineer do an estimate of what he thought the cost was if the city is going to be involved in the escrow fund, but I'll defer to Tina on the policy questions.
Thank you, Mr. Shockley. Mrs. Fisk?
I would agree that I know Brenton, or Mr. Hopler, sorry, I'm not used to calling him that, or Holter, I always say your name wrong. Anyway, I know you guys have looked into the costs for a road, and Jim, you might have as well. So if you guys wanted to send that information, we could have Dustin take that and come to some type of agreement on what would be a fair amount to be put away and held in escrow. I would prefer the escrow to be held at John Shockley's office, if that were okay, John. Just because it seems like a logical spot to hold it.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Mr. Commissioner Simmons.
I'm not saying I'd be opposed to it, but I do have huge concerns. I don't think this is a city of West Fargo issue. I think that now we're going to have Dustin do this, and that's going to cost city of West Fargo taxpayers money. I think what we're doing tonight should be strictly about West Fargo, not about Horace or not about that roadway. That's their concern and their responsibility to take care of. I realize there's probably some input we need, or maybe even financially, just because our area will be using it. But personally, I don't think we should open that can of worms.
Thank you, Commissioner.
I agree with Commissioner Simmons. Since the road is going to be in Horace and the developer should be working out the details on how it should be paid for, how it's developed in their city. I don't know why holding up the plat in West Fargo, why we need to put in that condition of what has to happen in another city.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson.
Mayor Dardis?
Commissioner,
Sorry. I have a question for you, Commissioner Olson. Do you mean the developer that owns the property outside of the city limits in Horace, or the developer that's within the city of West Fargo? Because those are two different people. If normally a developer within the city of West Fargo would only be concerned about West Fargo items, but that isn't the same owner of the property that goes from our city limits to 64th. That's a different person altogether.
Okay.
But clarification would help.
Thank you for clarifying.
Mr. Holper or Mr. Bullis, do you have estimates on this road, the two of you? Has the city of Horace's engineer get an estimate? And Mr. Bullis, have you had your engineer do one?
Did, Your Honor, and I included that with an email earlier today. The issue I think that we're going to have is that we're talking about two different roads in our minds. You know, when we talked with West Fargo a few years ago, this was emergency access, minimum maintenance, and I can fully appreciate that Horace wants a better road than that, especially now with the school. And that's why I proposed that instead of you guys having to have Dustin figure out what a road would cost, let's just pick an amount. And while I'm not happy about it, I would like to move my plat forward. And I thought, hey, otherwise I don't know how we resolve it. You know, what this road's going to look like or cost down the road.
Mr. Holper.
So I would add, for the city of Horace, we do have estimate for a rural road with paved asphalt, and that was around $350,000, just a little under that. We did not have an estimate done for the gravel yet from our engineer, as our mayor decided he wanted to push for the gravel road instead of the paved road. So obviously it would be cheaper than that. But we could have our engineer work up a number or estimate tomorrow if we need to.
Thank you, Mr. Holper.
Mr. President. Thank you. If I can just share my screen, I just want to point out the language that we're talking about, so I can direct you, hopefully, or at least recommend to you. I have it highlighted here. States the developers may be responsible for the cost of developing rural section gravel roadways to ensure access if the city of Horace fails to make those improvements. So I think you have some clear discretion here on how you direct us to work on this. I just want to make sure you know that. And I think given the coordination that we want to have here, you could direct staff to work out a negotiation between the developer and the city of Horace on a cost.
Thank you, Mr. Solberg.
Mayor?
Yes, sir, Mr. Commissioner Simmons.
Thank you, Mayor. And again, however that works out is fine, but I'm more interested in moving this project forward and getting this done than I am in the road, Horace's concerns about their road. I realize we got to work together, but I think our number one priority is making sure that we get this project moving forward, if that's our idea, I guess, or if that's what we want to do, not holding up for more estimates coming in.
Thank you, Commissioner Simmons. Commissioner Jurdevig.
Well, along those same lines, I agree with Commissioner Simmons. I agree with to be honest with the idea that Mr. Bullis is putting out. Like, let's figure out what the estimate would be for a minimum maintenance gravel road, because I think that is the expectation that we all had going into it. And let's ask the developer to put that into escrow. And then it's on the city of Horse to determine what they do. But then we approve the plat so that the city of West Fargo can continue to develop the way we want. It kind of feels like, there's a big expectation difference between what everybody thought was going to go in there before and what the city of Horse wants now, and they want the developer to pay for the whole thing. And I just don't think that's fair.
Thank you, Commissioner Jordan.
Commissioner President Dardis?
Mrs. Fisk, excuse me. Mrs. Fisk first, and then Mr. Scott.
Dustin is probably going to answer this, but my question was, would our city staff be the negotiating person, or would it just be that we give a deadline between Horace and Mr. Bullis on coming up with that amount and then escrow it? Because it seems like we're stepping into Horace's territory again and trying to stick our nose into their business. I could be wrong, but.
Thank you, Mrs. Fisk. As the letter that Tim read, Mr. Solberg read earlier, the city of Horace is asking us to have that as one of the conditions. So, I'm very sensitive to us also getting involved in the Horace's business. That's up to Mr. Holper and Mr. Peterson and their commission. But the city of Horace is asking for our help on that. Mr. Scott.
Well, thank you, Commissioner President Dardis. So maybe to bring in a couple more complications, as John alluded to earlier, the devil's always in the detail, but a couple other items to work out here. It's not just a cost estimate, which, again, there's going to be questions to even get to that particular number. How are we going to address drainage? Are we going to have a deep ditch? Are we going to have storm sewer in here? So on and so forth. But the other question that hasn't been discussed yet is maintenance. If we go and build this gravel roadway, will West Fargo maintain that, or Horace? And again, just some questions that still need to probably be resolved with this, as well as finding a cost. And again, determining a cost of this, there's still going to be debate on what all needs to go into this, because I can tell you that spending $50,000 on just some trucks of gravel to, brush off the grass and throw gravel down is not going to suffice. It's going to deteriorate quick. And so generally a rural section is going to need ditches. The next question is going to be, how deep are those ditches? So on and so forth. The dominoes continue to fall. But we could work through that stuff. I think the next question, though, that really needs to get discussed is maintenance.
Can I say something?
Certainly, Mrs. Fisk.
I am not in favor of using taxpayer dollars from the city of West Fargo in any way, shape, or form in another community. And it's not because I don't care about Horace, I do, but that is, to me, totally inappropriate.
Mr. Mayor, not to jump the gun, but I'm gonna make a motion. I think we should move forward with approving this, with the additional item being that the developer put $50,000 into escrow, and then it's up to the city of Horse. If they don't do anything, we will have a road that dead ends. But I don't believe we should put our city engineers' time into this. I don't think we should put any of our city employees' time into this. I think we should, figure out a number, and I'll propose it's $50,000, and that's to create a minimum maintenance road. And if Horse wants to create something bigger and better than that, it's on them to do so.
Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
Commissioner Simmons seconds. Commissioner Jerdevig moves. Discussion. I have a question. With Mr. Bullis or Mr. Holper or Mr. Scott or Mr. Solberg, you guys are no cost more than I do. Is the $50,000 amount that Commissioner Jerdevig is suggesting in his motion adequate?
Well, Commissioner Presidardis, at least from my standpoint, $50,000 it's not going to pay for a road. I use that number as just, again, a generic, throw it out there. That might be, in terms of how much gravel you would need to place on the ground, there might be $50,000 worth of gravel, but I think really to build a rural section gravel surface roadway out here, you're probably going to get closer to $200,000. But again, in terms of having an escrow and keeping the developer, I guess, financially committed, that's where, I don't know if you want to go for full Monty roadway, or if $50,000 is adequate. That's probably further discussion.
And to be clear, I'm not personally worried in terms of my motion to make sure that it covers the full cost of development of that road.
All right, very good. Just wanted that clarification. We have a motion on the table. Is there any other discussion, commissioners? Is there anyone that would like to add any additional comments? All right. Mr. Shockey.
Mr. Commission President, I would suggest that I'm assuming that motion meant that we're supposed to create an agreement for the escrow and details to be determined on how that escrow works.
Yes, I appreciate the additional details in my motion, but yes, I assume that would be the case.
Thank you, Mr.
And
Shockey.
Eric, I'm sorry.
Commissioner Simmons.
Thank you, Mayor. Eric, if we move forward with this, are you okay if for some reason that number is way lower or something, we could go up a few $1,000s? Are you okay? If we get to that point, are you okay with that? Or are you firm at the 50,000?
Ask that one more time. I didn't quite follow. I didn't quite follow the question.
Well, I'm just wondering if 50,000, if like that's not going to get anything, then for sure Horace will probably say no. But if it at least cover, the problem we're having here, I think between the two, Horace and the developer, is that one perhaps wants not a road, but they want a base and all that to get ready for the asphalt.
Yeah.
Where the developer is saying, I don't think that's quite right. That's asking too much.
Well, I mean, and not to be very blunt, the city of Horace could have come to this meeting or approached us earlier and said, here's our cost estimate. Here's how we think it should be. We're willing to split it. We're willing to do something. They've come and basically put forth a requirement, and they want the developer to pay 100% of a road that's in a different city than what the developer is developing.
Okay, I'm fine with that.
I'm just picking a number.
Okay, I'm fine with that.
We have a motion on the table. Is there any more discussion? Mike Thorstad. Commissioner Thorstad.
Just a question related to this, Tim. As far as on the West Fargo part of it, are we going to pave 9th at least down to that? Is that part of the second reading here that it'll go down to Deb Drive? So it's not stopping at the northern road only. I know that was discussed last time, and to me, we should do at least that. Ideally, I'd like to see it go up to the border. Now, listening to the discussion, we could very well have a dead end there for some time until Horace determines they need a connection. So that's something we got to be prepared for. But I want at the very minimum, in my opinion, that we have to go down to that second street down there.
I concur.
It'll be discussed in the next item, Dustin's Improvement District. It would be my recommendation that we take the pavement down to the border, because that will be something someday that it will connect to Horace. But I'm saying that without any input from the developer in any sort of conversation you guys might need to have.
Yeah, I don't know. Like Eric's 50,000, that's obviously low, but what the discussion can be between Mr. Bolus and the city of Horace. Mr. Bolus is a long-term developer in town, and I would guess he probably has some interest in Horace at some point. So maybe they certainly can sit down and come to something maybe that's more amicable. Otherwise, if we could say a Horace could take $50,000, it means better than nothing. But on the other hand, I can't see them. I don't think it's a high priority for them at this time, but at the point it will, and hopefully they could work something out beyond the 50,000 at some point, because I don't like to speak for Mr. Bolus, but I'm I'm sure he and a lot of his partners or people we work with will have interest in Horace, because Horace is, in my opinion, is the next West Fargo. So,
But by doing this, we actually create the motivation for them to try to figure something else out because they know what the alternative.
yeah, and I concur with the comments. We want to be good neighbors with Horace and try to work as best we can. But Horace's business is Horace's business, and ours is ours. Now, granted, we've kind of created a scenario here where we're butting up to their border and kind of creating a decision for them to have to make too, whether it's now or down the road. So, but that's my only comments.
Thank you, Mr. Thorstad. Is there any more discussion on the motion? So the motion on the table is that we set up help me with the term.
Escrow.
Well, I think we approve the item with the addition of creating an escrow of $50,000.
We have to, the escrow motion in itself, the way it was made, Eric, we have to vote on that separately.
Okay.
So, Commissioner Jurdovic and Commissioner Simmons moved and seconded that we have a motion for an escrow account of $50,000 to be held at Mr. Shockley's law office. Is there any further discussion?
One last, just for clarification, Mr. Shockley, this would satisfy the terms of the developer agreement then, creating this escrow account?
Yeah, we had, when we drafted the developers agreement, we had given the city commission some flexibility to deal with this issue because we really, at the time that this development first started, we really didn't have all of the answers regarding what was going to happen in Horace. I think the construction of the school by West Fargo down there really jump-started this conversation. When we originally contemplated it, we thought that the areas in Horace would probably be more akin to like a gravel or rural road section. And now there'll be more traffic, obviously. So we left a lot of discretion with the council or the commission to decide how to deal with this issue.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shockley. Is there any further discussion on the motion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Next, we're going to go back to item number 6, which is the Wild's 20th final plot approval. Now the discussion is on that, as presented by Mr. Solberg. What is the pleasure of the commission?
I move to approve the second reading.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Jurdovic seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the Wild's 20th edition final plot approval, second reading. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, is all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Again, we have adjusted our regular agenda. We'll now move into item that's listed on the original agenda as item number 8, and that's the review the improvement boundary map, legal description, and other documents for the creation of an improvement district designated as Sewer, Water, Storm, and Street Improvement District 1331. Mr. Scott.
Thank you, Commission President Dardis and members of the commission. So following suit with our previous conversation here, now we're going to get into a little more of the specifics on what improvements are needed. And if you recall, during the last meeting, we had a brief discussion on whether or not the improvement district would need to encompass existing properties. And over the last couple of weeks in working on this with more engineering, it is to me very evident that we are going to have regional type improvements associated with servicing not only the Wild's 20th edition, but again, the needs of the remaining development. So what I've created for you today is a boundary map. And you can see here, I'm going to share my screen. Give me a moment. And please confirm when you're able to see it.
Yes.
Okay, so what I've got included in your packet here is again a boundary map, improvement district boundary, identified with the bold black dash line around the perimeter of the Wilds development south of 52nd Avenue. So on the very top of the map, you have 52nd Avenue. Towards the bottom of the map, you have the beginning of the city of Horace. I'm going to scroll down another sheet in your packet. This particular map here is demonstrating where the local improvements are located versus the regional infrastructure that we feel is located. Now, again, I just caution, there hasn't been a lot of effort put into specific design, but in terms of evaluating what we think the overall improvements are, this is what we currently know today. 9th Street, as was just previously discussed, I believe Commissioner Thorstead brought it up, it should really extend past this first approach here into the Wilds 20th development. There is also going to be some regional storm infrastructure needed somewhere along this roadway to connect this retention pond here to a future pond that'll be constructed in future development phases, basically on the west side of 9th Street. So with those two components, again, the extension of 9th Street as a collector roadway that's regional, and with some of the enlarged storm sewer infrastructure, that is generating the need for having a larger improvement boundary than just the Wilds 20th plat itself. Everything else that you see here will be a local improvement. In putting together some rough cost estimates, we have determined that the average regional assessment is going to be somewhere around $1,500 per lot. So if you live up to the north, say in Wild 7th or 8th or 9th or 10th, 11th editions, somewhere up in here, expect about a $1,500 assessment. And that is going to greatly depend on how far south do we extend 9th Street West. And if we extend it all the way down as close to the border as we can, will we actually continue a full urban section that has the median, so on and so forth, all the way down there? Or will we stop that back up at this first entrance into at Deb Drive here, the last entrance coming in and out of the Wilds 20th? So some of these questions will be answered as we my motion that I'm asking for today is to not only create this boundary, this improvement district and this boundary, but also to direct the engineering department to work on the full engineer's report. We will develop options and alternatives and more specific cost estimates relating to the improvements, but wanted to bring forward some of this information before you make this decision tonight. So again, there's still quite a bit of work to do, but at this time, since it was discussed during the plat review, getting 9th Street down to the Horace West Fargo border, I wouldn't recommend necessarily getting it down to the border. Well, specifically, we won't have the easements or right of way to do that. We'll have to pick a certain point where we will conclude our construction so that we can work within our right of way. But I think where we're going to get into some further analysis and discussion is how do we continue that roadway once we go past this intersection here, this Deb Drive? How far south do we continue the full urban roadway section? Again, that's got a divided median in there. And at first blush, I really think we would probably end it right after this first intersection. And then we will transition into basically taper down that roadway into an asphalt section maybe, or if it's concrete, we'll stay with concrete, but again, only to a certain point. And then we'll probably have a turnaround, an area for trucks to be able to turn around and come back north. unless, again, we proceed with a roadway down to 64th Avenue. So again, I bring that up because those are the kinds of decisions now that start to impact what kind of cost estimates we're putting together, and ultimately what type of or the plans and specifications when we get to that particular point as well. So still quite a bit of discussion to have over the next few weeks if this is approved tonight. So with that said, I guess I will stop talking and ask if there are any questions before I request a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Commissioners, do you have questions, Mr. Scott?
Yeah, Dustin, what's the Cass rural water users? Do they own property down there? I see you got an assessment number there for them.
Yes, good question, Commissioner Thorstead. So all of the Wilds development south of 52nd Avenue is actually within the Cass rural water service area, their service jurisdiction. So every phase that we've done south of here, we've established agreements with Cass rural water where the city with their improvement district installs that infrastructure. However, that cost then is charged to Cass rural water, and then they directly assess those costs back to the properties. I don't know if they create an assessment district or if they acquire those costs back with user fees. I'm not exactly sure how they deal with that, but so we anticipate there's going to be about $580,000 worth of water main work for the Wilds 20th, and that cost, it'll be included in our improvements, but we will bill Cass rural water for that cost and not charge that out into our assessment district.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Thorstead. Great question. Commissioners, any additional questions of Mr. Scott?
What roughly does 1,500 per lot equate to per annum? We're at 25 years on bonding, right? Obviously, there's interest. I guess the thing that it's challenging. I know we're down the road. We're on number 20, and there's probably be a 21, a 22, a 23. But all those people, and this is what we run into all over town. Those people north of there, living their lives, got their property, got their streets, got the water works, everything's cool, and then all of a sudden they get nipped, even though it might not be a huge assessment, it's still an assessment. And there's no answer now that we're this far down the road. I mean, the ideal answer would be is this is going to be a Wilds development, and when they buy the house and they get a statement says expect to get nipped about 10 times before we're done. I would assume if we get 9th Street in, that's going to be a good chunk of the assessments going forward. But there's still probably more water features I would assume you have to have for the storm system down there. And again, I don't know the answer. I kind of feel bad for all those people up there. They buy a house and, like I say, they look out their window and everything seems to be in place and functional, and then all of a sudden someone comes along and nips them like this, and maybe it shouldn't be a surprise. They see open fields. They should understand it's going to continue to expand. But I don't say there's anything we can do outside of maybe acknowledge the fact that it's kind of tough that they keep getting nipped, even if it's not a huge amount.
Commissioner President Dardis?
Oh, Mrs. Fisk.
Yes. If you take that $1,500 and we divide over 25 years and you add interest, it's about $62.40 a year.
Yeah, so it's not huge, but it's something.
Right. Yep.
Thank you, Mrs. Fisk.
And the other thing I would add, Commissioner Thorstead, to your concern of constantly getting hit with another district, this is where when the Wilds 11th came forward last year, we were at the same time frame or same phase, the engineer's report phase, if you will, back in January of last year with the Wilds 11th edition, and the commission had requested or required the developer and the engineering staff to hold a neighborhood meeting to inform the current residents of what's coming. And I would anticipate that's going to be a similar directive. Now, we maybe don't have to have a neighborhood meeting, but certainly it could be letters that are sent out as a notice to the neighborhoods. But again, I certainly share that sentiment that, someone's been living out here for 3-4 years now, and they just continue to see a new improvement district. And you're right, there'll be additional phases to the west of 9th Street now, which will probably include some regional infrastructure. So there'll be another 1 or 2 assessment districts, again, albeit relatively small, but it's just that if anything, it's certainly a nuisance, and it's something that it's difficult for them to plan. But I will say, in the effort of having that neighborhood meeting last year, I stood there with the developers, and we told them that there are going to be a few other phases coming. But again, it's one of those where you forget about it.
I guess other commissioners could chime in. I don't think you necessarily have to have a meeting again, but I certainly think a letter to them noting that they're going to be getting this and what it's for, and if you can explain it, that it's things that have to be put in just because it fills out. And hopefully, again, if it's $60 a year, I mean, that's still something, but at least it's only like $5 a month. It's not gonna, most people, it's not gonna kill, but it would be nice to at least give them a heads up, whether it's in a little form of a letter or something. And again, reiterate the fact we're getting close to filling this area out, but there's still some things that have to be done down the road. So I feel bad for people that maybe, there's probably a lot of them that just don't anticipate that. And even if it's a small amount, it's still something.
Thank you. Commissioner Olson.
Well, I can attest to that, Commissioner Torstead. I've been in my house here in Eagle Run since 2006, and I'm still getting nickel and dime for every our district that's down there. That's where our mayor lives. A storm sewer district went in that area, and I got hit with that 14 or 13 plus years after the fact. So it's part of living in a brand new part of town.
Commissioners, let's we're on item number 8. Mr. Scott is asking for a motion to create a sewer, water, storm, and street improvement district 1331. And if you're inclined to make a motion on that, I would ask that you also have include in your language a neighborhood communication notification.
I have one question, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, Commissioner Jurdovic, please.
And I know engineers don't like making guesses, Dustin, but it's safe to assume that if 9th Street West ended at Deb Drive West, because from that point on it's just a dead end, that $1,500 would be something less. Is that a safe assumption on my part? Because
yes,
until the city of Horace builds something, why would we extend it further?
Nope, great point, and that is absolutely true, and that's where if we decide to end 9th Street right after this first approach here, and I marked a line there, for example, let's say we go 50 feet south of that approach and just put in a turnaround of some sort. That's about 300 or so less feet than trying to get it down to the border. However, the caveat to that now will be at some point we will extend it all the way down, and it is another district, another improvement that'll be made that will come with the regional assessment again. But I really think we will probably stop it short here somewhere and wait until there is some further connection down to 64th Avenue before we go much further than that. So,
well, and why it might make sense for us to wait is until we know what Horace is going to build or wants to build. I mean, if all they're doing is putting in gravel, then maybe our last 100 yards is gravel, because why not? It's a gravel road. I mean, I think anything we can do there to try to minimize the special assessment. I mean, I don't know why we'd build a road past Deb Drive West, because at this point it just dead ends.
Well,
so I would be willing to make the motion to create this with the assumption that 9th Street West stop sometime very shortly after Deb Drive West with a turnaround.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Olson seconds. Been moved and seconded to create a improvement district for sewer, water, storm, and street improvement for District 1331 and Wilds 20th, with neighborhood communication going out with regarding the assessment.
I just have one question before you call for the vote. I'm looking on the map that Dustin has on there. We already have a Deb Drive West already north of this area. Is that street already been named in Wilds 20th? I just want to make sure that we're clear on where Deb Drive West actually is. Because I could see it on the map just above, on the map where with the red hash marks going across it. I see it there on the plat, but up north, if you put that one right there, right where your hand is, there's already Deb Drive West there. So I just don't want to be confused as to where Deb Drive West is actually located.
Looks like it's continuation, one big road, but I'm with you, Commissioner Olson. It doesn't seem logical. They should have some kind of different name or just 68th Avenue or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we'll have another Dolores Drive, Commissioner
on Deb
Thorstad.
Drive, and you could drive a long time finding those. That Deb is something. She must be a wife or something.
I just want to make sure we're clear on where where it's located at. Because Deb Drive West is up north to me.
Mr. Scott, question for you. When you're getting an estimate on this, is it not a reasonable thought process to see what the additional, as an amendment, what it would cost to go all the way down because of the efficiencies possibly with the contractor?
Absolutely, Commissioner President. We will certainly put together alternatives for the engineer's report. When I bring the engineer's report at the next meeting, it will include probably a half a dozen alternatives at that point with some known costs. And then there is always the option to proceed with a bid where we will accept an alternate bid, if you will, to build it all the way down to our city limits, all the way down to 64th. We can do things like that within our bidding process to actually get a cost from a contractor and at that time remove it.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. We have a motion on the table. Again, it's to create a street improvement district 1331 for sewer, water, storm, and the streets with neighborhood communication and notifications with regard to the assessment. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next order of business. On your agenda, it's item number 1, but it's now number 3. First reading of Ordinance 1158, Senior Emergency Route Ordinance. Mr. Shockley.
Good evening, West Fargo Commissioners, Commission President. Tonight is Ordinance Number 1158. You'll recall the Commission had some discussion about declaring a snow emergency. It was decided to make slight modifications to the existing ordinance. Under the modifications, the President of the Commission, or in his absence, the Public Works Director, and the Commissioner of Streets in charge can declare the emergency. It's a relatively simple, straightforward change to the ordinance, but it just makes clear that it would primarily be the President of the Board of the City Commission declaring the snow emergency. Can certainly answer any questions that you may have, but this really comes out of the prior discussion the Commission had about the snow emergency routes.
Thank you, Mr. Shockley. Commissioners, are there questions for Mr. Shockley?
I move to approve the first reading.
Second.
Commissioner Olson.
Second.
Commissioner Thorstad seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the first reading of ordinance number 1158, snow emergency route, as presented by Mr. Shockley. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next order of business is item number 4, resolution terminating emergency flood declaration. Mr. Shockley.
Thank you, Mr. Commission President, members of the West Fargo City Commission. This was an item that Pierre had asked me to prepare and present. The city had previously declared an emergency flood declaration regarding flooding from the Cheyenne River. In the staff's determination and Pierre's determination, it was time to end that emergency declaration. And so such action requires a resolution by the City Commission terminating the emergency flood declaration.
Thank you, Mr. Shockley. Are there any questions? Mr. Shockley? Comments? Mrs. Fisk, did you have a comment you need to make? Okay. Commissioners?
I'll move to approve.
Thank you. Commissioner Olson moves to a resolution terminating the emergency flood declaration. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Jurdovic seconds. Been moved and seconded to resolution terminating the emergency flood declaration. Is there any discussion?
Just a related comment on the diversion has been closed off. I think still seems like there's a lot of water going through the West Fargo part of it. Is that going to be open fairly soon? Maybe Matt knows.
Mr. Anvik, do you know the answer to that question? Or Mr.
Well,
Scott?
I'm asking, it's starting to get a little warm out and that water's sitting stagnant in the city. Starts to get kind of skanky after a while.
Mr. Scott?
Well, Commissioner Thorstad, yeah, we're waiting for river levels to drop enough to where we can open up the gates. But until that time, and quite honestly, if you'd asked me this last week, I would have thought by now we could have been low enough to open them, but it still continues to hover in that action level. So, but we do have the capability of opening our call it, we've got a kind of we call it a freshness pipe, but we put in a bypass around the gate a couple of years ago with Southeast Cass, and we could open that to allow some water to come through the north side of town, kind of deal with that stagnant situation.
Yeah, I'd just say be cognizant of it, because I know as it gets up to 80s now and that water's sitting there in the town, we all know it can get pretty skanky pretty fast. So that's not directed to the resolution per se, but it is part of the operations regarding floods. So.
Right. We have a motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. To Mr. Thorsted's comments, Mr. Scott will rely on you and Mr. Anvik's discretion on that. Item number 5, the West Fargo Police Department's 2019 annual report. Acting Chief Jerry Boyer.
Thank you, Commission President and members of the Commission. I'm sharing my screen. Can you see that now?
Not yet. There we go.
We good?
We're good.
Okay. Thank you again, Commission President Dardis, members of the Commission. It's an honor to be able to present the 2019 West Fargo Police Department Annual Report on behalf of the men and women of the West Fargo Police Department. Overall, we did have a decrease in crime last year, while calls for service were slightly up. We also promoted 3 new sergeants last year, Sergeant Kyle Johnson, Sergeant Ryan Haskell, and Sergeant Cody Belkiel to patrol. We also had 3 additional hires last year. We are dedicating this annual report in remembrance of Landon Solberg, Grantley Johnson, and Miles Allen, who courageously battled cancer and lost their fight to this horrible disease. These 3 young men and their families were an inspiration to our police department, and our thoughts and prayers still go out to those families. one of the biggest things that I wanted to spend a little time on tonight was talking to you all about our cultural liaison. Officer Feldman, I know you're all aware of the work that he did last summer as he attended a couple of the events that we had. Officer Feldman's work was accomplished in an amazing fashion. He did more in that first year of the program than we had ever envisioned being possible in the first 3 years. Officer Feldman was with our department for 5 years on patrol before taking on this position. We had swimming lessons that were provided throughout the entire year, including bus services to pick the kids up. We learned more about other cultures. They learned about our cultures and our police department and the fact that we're out there to provide a service to the community and not just enforcement action. The Around the World night was a huge success, and I'm hoping once COVID leaves our community that's something that we can once again share with the community. Our calls for service last year, I put the number for 2009 on the slide just to kind of show the drastic change in our community in the last 10 years. In 2009, we had just over 11,000 calls for service. And those calls for service are anything from a traffic stop to an unlock to a felony arrest to a lengthy investigation. And the fact that in 2019, we broke the 30,000 mark for the first time in our department's history just is a testament to the dedicated men and women of the police department and a true team effort to continue to provide the service to the community. All of this occurred while our reported crimes in 2019 actually went down a little bit. So again, a phenomenal job by everyone in the police department, from our sworn staff to our non-sworn staff. This was a huge team effort. Everybody has bought into this process and everything that we're doing in this department as a team and one fight. That's one thing that has been part of our mantra for the last 3 years and one thing that's going to continue. And it's just been a phenomenal place to work, and they're dedicated to doing a great job every single day. I just wanted to keep this brief. I know you guys have had some long commission meetings lately. Again, 2019, we were named the safest city in the state of North Dakota. Again, that's a team effort. There's no one person that deserves all the credit. This is the men and women going out there every day, doing their job to keep our community safe, building those relationships, working with the community to solve problems. That's what's keeping our numbers where they're at. This is also all done by a data-driven approach. We're looking at things intelligently. We're not just driving around aimlessly. We know where the areas are in town we need to focus on, and we're providing that appropriate attention to those areas in town. This is also done by being good stewards of our taxpayer dollars. Our budget last year, we came in under budget. We use those funds wisely. We base every purchase on what is needed, not as what is wanted. So again, my hat's off to the men and women that I work with every day. It is an honor and a privilege, and I will answer any questions that any of you may have.
Thank you, Deputy Chief. Any questions from the commissioners?
Other than thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Simmons.
Yeah, I concur. Great job. You guys do a great job. And I just figured out what my legacy will be in my tenure. Calls for service have tripled. So there's something I can take with me.
That a boy, Mike.
I got to look on the positive side, right?
Yeah.
The crimes went down, though. Crimes went down.
Crime went down, yes.
Oh, good. Well,
Deputy Chief, I want to thank you and your department for all the work, and particularly your command staff. The dedication of your crime report for 2019, Brantley and Landon and Miles, is worthy of notice because of the community approach that you take to law enforcement, and to acknowledge those three young men is terrific. And also for the command staff, yourself and former Chief Yankee, for putting forth the request for the cultural liaison officer. I've been to a number of those events, and without a doubt, it's gained great trust from some of those communities, and the response from the leaders when they interact with me is so positive. So great job.
Thank you.
Thank you for protecting, and thank you for serving.
My pleasure.
All right. This is not an actionable item, I don't believe. to accept this. So any other questions for Deputy Chief? Thank you. Next order of business is the item number 6 is the water and sewer rate review and recommendation by Jim Larson.
Thank you, Commissioner President Dardis and commissioners. Are you able to hear me okay?
It's fine. Thank you, Jim.
Okay. I'd just like to thank you for your time on this item this evening. Also, I wanted to make sure that we talked about that. We don't want to underestimate the magnitude of this decision to the residents of the city of West Fargo. This is a very material decision, and we do understand that, and we appreciate your consideration as we work through it. Just some prepared remarks that I have here. Utilities are required to charge sufficient fees to cover the cost of operations and capital. Our preliminary analysis of the utility financials provided data that this might not be the case in West Fargo. So with that in mind, the City Commission approved AE2S Nexus to perform the study on July 15th, 2019. So we've been working on this for just about a year at this point. Just to let you know, Ryan Graff from AE2S Nexus is available for questions as well as we work through this information. The preliminary findings of the report from AE2S Nexus was presented to the City Commission 2 weeks ago on May 4th. And since then, we've also had opportunity to review in detail the report with each of the commissioners. So our goal there was to make sure everybody was informed and had opportunity to ask questions. So one of the things that was not really covered as we presented at the last commission meeting is why the requested rate increase. So as I previously stated, utilities are required to charge sufficient fees to cover the cost of operations and capital. This is required by Century Code. So at this point, the wastewater fund is not covering the current expenses or adequate revenues to cover capital repairs. That's what the findings are at this point. We just did some quick figuring even today with Commissioner Simmons, and right now we are just not even covering our costs of operation today. Another part of it is we want to look at a better rate structure. Our current rate structure does not fairly charge the users of the system. We have some users that aren't bearing the cost that they should for the amount of use they have within the system. And the change in the rate structure will allow us to do that today and also as we move forward for the next 10, 15, 20 years, hopefully. Another part that's probably more serious is that we're not, right now, because of where our rates are, particularly for wastewater, our water rates are pretty sufficient. We're just asking more of a rate structure there. But for our wastewater or sewer, right now, we do not have the capacity to secure the bonding we would need. Right now, we have $7 million of existing projects that we've expended funds towards that we need to cover the cost of. Those costs were originally approved with the understanding that we would be doing rate increases to cover them as we move forward. So right now, we have those to bond for, and at this time, our current rates will not support these capital projects. If we don't increase the rates, we will need to find a different source of funding, which could be either special assessments, it could be through mill levy, or taking funds out of our reserves, which are already being identified for other needs, or to keep our bonding rate strong. So another question that comes out is, well, is this caused because we set up the contracts with the city of Fargo? Right now, we purchase our water from them at $3.25 per 1,000 gallons. And for the sewage or the wastewater that we send to them, we are charged $3 per 1,000 gallons. So, but right now, as we take a look at it, if we were to look at the cost that we're recommending to be charging here, right now, the water would cost, the purchase price is only 46.4% of that volumetric component. For the wastewater, we're at 42.85%. So I'm going to just use the term about half of the cost is for the water or for the processing of the sewage. The other component that when you take a look at what we're charged, the prior studies that were done by the city of West Fargo demonstrated that if we were to build our own either processing plant for the sewage or treatment of the water, our cost would be substantially higher than what is being charged by the city of Fargo at this time. So the cause of the rates is not related to the contracts with the city of Fargo. The other part is that the way our water rates are structured, for us to be able to draw on the water, our aquifers are basically drying up, and we'd have to move to a change to drawing from the Cheyenne River. Based on tests that were done in prior times, the cost of that would be pretty high. And so that we believe that that the purchasing of the water and the processing of sewage with Fargo was a prudent decision. The other thing that people ask, so why are you adding more onto the charge? So if they charge you $3 or $3.25 per thousand, why do we have to charge so much more? And the response to that is that we have costs just in the distribution system. We have electricity for lift stations. We got water towers that we have to maintain and build and pumping. We have a water distribution system, the pipes in the roads and all the way up to the houses. We have a cost to repair the lines, the lift stations, the water towers, to process the metering, billing, and collection, which I'm sure many residents would say we should just do for free. Capital cost to repair and replace water, capital cost to repair and replace lift stations and water towers. These are big cost items. Water towers are multi-million and so on, and we need to stay current with them. Another question that comes is that we have both a base charge and a volume-based charge. And the reason we have that is that whether you draw any water or you send any water out, wastewater out, we still have to cover our costs of maintaining the systems that are there to deliver it. So that's why you have a base fee, and then you have a volumetric after that. The volumetric is important because that is what allows us to charge by usage. So in other words, the more you use, the more you pay. The larger the meter, the more you pay because there's more costs associated with a larger meter system, whether it's the infrastructure to bring it to the meter, the actual cost of maintaining or managing and repairing the meters. So that's why the other thing we want to make sure is that right now, based on the study that's been done with the capital improvements plan that our city engineering and staff have been putting together, and that has been transferred then to the AE2S and Nexus, we have about just a little under $12 million of projects pending and current for water, and $24.5 million for wastewater. So we have some significant needs within our capital work to move forward. And our intention is not to special assess these, but to have these projects paid through the rates as they should be, in our opinion. So that's kind of the impetus of the why. The other thing, a question that had come up through our discussions is the breakdown of account types. So if you look at our rates or our accounts, about 91, this is on the number of counts, not on revenues. But the number of accounts we have for residential is about 91% of all of our accounts. 6% are multifamily, and only about 3% are commercial or industrial. So you can see the impact of this. I also will tell you that these rates, as they're coming forward to be structured, are going to have more significance on the multifamily or apartment dwellings and commercial and industrial. They are going to see it, whether it's in the size of the meter for water, and then for all wastewater, our rates are going up significantly. But that's primarily because they've not been adjusted for many years as the cost of processing of wastewater has gone up. The recommendations of the consultants are shown on page 22 and 24 of the presentation that is in your book. I'd be glad to share my screen out real quickly so that we can see what they are. Let me get there and then I'll share out. So I don't know if that, I don't,
We can see it, Jim.
can you see the screen? Okay. So let me close that. So here you can see what the request is. That $7.25. Right now, our current fee is $7 for this size meter, but you can see we do move it all the way up to 240 for a 6-inch. We are not asking for a change in the volumetric or the rate per thousand. That was raised earlier and is with these meter size or fixed charges size, we feel we're sufficient to meet the needs of the water utility. But I do want to point out that that as we move forward, our consultant has asked us to consider making sure that we continue to increase our rates on an annual basis. We're not in a situation, we're not asking for a once and done. We will still need to continue to move up inflationary as our costs will move with it. I'm going to move on to the wastewater rates. For this one, right now, we have a fixed cost of $10. And then after you move forward, you pass 10,000 gallons, then we start charging you $1 per thousand. As you can understand, if our rate is $3 per thousand, we're losing money on that and as we move forward. So what is being proposed by the consultant is to do a flat rate of $9, and that's just a base fee. That does not include any volume. And then for any volume, they're recommending $4 per thousand. One change I want to put on there though, they're also recommending that we cap it. So once a home or resident hits 8,000 gallons, it's capped. So one of the things that's happening today, if you have a lawn sprinkler, not only do you pay for more water, you also pay for more sewage or more wastewater. Well, we all know that what goes on the lawn does not go down the wastewater. So this capping at 8,000 allows us to address those who use a sprinkler system and not basically penalize them through sewer charges. Again, but I do want to also point out they are asking for changes in fee rates. And these are based on the future needs within the wastewater utility. So I don't want to miss this. Tonight, we're only asking you to consider increasing rates for 2020. But I don't want to, I want to be clear that this is an annual occurrence of increases. It just won't be at the rate it is today. I also will say that those that are commercial or apartments will probably see the biggest increase as a percent of what they're paying today. It will be a material number. Some of them could see as high as $500 a month change in their current bills. Commissioner Simmons and I were doing some discussion today, and I understand that's a big number. But the point I would like to make is it's not the number is large because we are undercharging at such a high amount today. We are just significantly less than we probably should be today, but it is still a large increase any way you cut it. So I don't want to minimize the impact to our residents or to our commercial or industrial on that. So what we are asking tonight is the commission to consider approving the rates as presented on these two slides, which is page 22 and 24 in your documents, and that they would be effective July 1st, 2020. We also want to let you know the water is a minor increase with the commercial industrial having the changes to the base monthly fee. So the commercial industrial will see the biggest hit. Homeowners will see very little change. They'll see about a 25-cent per month change is actually what they would see. Commercial industrial is about 9% of all of our accounts. The recommended rates are compared to surrounding communities. Fargo will still have lower rates, but Fargo also has capital funding options for capital in their utilities that the city of West Fargo does not have available at this time, one of them being sales tax. There was discussion on why because we are asking that you would consider the tiered pricing as well, tier 2. And this is just to put it more in place. The tier 2 does not come into place until they've hit 20,000 gallons, which even with a lawn sprinkler, you would not hit. But we do want to put it in place so that we have multiple tiers available as we move forward in the future. The other part, we also want to let you know that should this be approved by commission, our communications department, our consultants, and all other staff are prepared to develop a full messaging communication to the residents and the businesses of West Fargo so they have an awareness of this. And that as staff, we also would coordinate with our software company to make sure that we could implement the billing timely and properly. So those are my prepared remarks. And with that, I'll be glad to stand for questions from the commission.
Thank you, Mr. Larson. Commissioners, questions?
Mayor?
I have a couple.
Commissioner Simmons first.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Jim, I just want to be clear about this. Is it very clear that if we don't do something here, that we will not be able to bond out?
Well, I cannot give you a guarantee on that. We would have to actually go after some different options that to go after the bonding. There is options within the state that they allow you for utilities that cannot make the proper reserve ratios, which we could not make today. They do have bonding available, but I can't guarantee that we could get it.
But I guess what I'm asking is, are we putting ourselves at risk if we do not agree to this tonight or approve it?
If we do not do something, we are at risk, yes.
Okay, thank you.
One comment, I apologize, forgot to mention. Right now, if this is approved, the amount of funds that this generates on a monthly basis, approximately $200,000 per month. It's a $2.4 million annual change to our revenue stream, which seems like, it's a material number for us. And the longer we delay it, it's just the longer we delay it and a deeper hole we get within our sewer fund. Our water fund is okay, but our sewer fund will struggle.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Additional questions, Mr. Jurdovic?
Yeah, I'd have two of them. The first one, I just to make everyone aware, I asked Jim and Tina this question earlier today. I'll ask it a little bit differently. Do we think that by July 1st, we can have the technology figured out to be able to import the water quantities from all of our residents that use casserole water in the wilds, because we can't bill their sewer rates because they're on West Fargo sewer because we don't have that data today? So it feels like July 1st is a really quick turnaround in order to figure out how to get that, have it tested, and know that it works for those residents. I realize there's probably not an answer to that question because I didn't even think about it until today, but I brought it up earlier, so that's more of just an FYI. The second question just kind of hit me too, and I'm going to use our mayor as an example because I know where he lives, and I know that he has a septic and is not connected to the West Fargo sewer system. I would assume that he doesn't pay a sewer rate, even though he would be one of those casserole water users, I'm guessing.
You're correct.
We would be getting the data from. At the same time, that means that when the day comes when his development someday decides to hook into West Fargo sewer, there'd be an assessment there. So there could be potentially even a reason why those residents would want to start paying a sewer fee, because then maybe that would dramatically change that special assessment story for them. So that's a complicated issue and one that I'm not sure I have an answer to, but it was an interesting question. I guess I'm just confirming my assumption that our residents that have a septic, which are many of them on the south side along the Cheyenne River, would not be paying a sewer rate charge, correct?
For 20 years, there's been a city rule that there's a hookup fee for anybody that joins south of the interstate. Mrs. Fisk, go ahead.
The hookup fee that you're speaking of is more water related. That's the question of, I hadn't given any thought to if, the people that are on septic, would they, of course they wouldn't pay a flow charge, but would they still pay the minimum so that when the time comes that they come into the city limits, since they're already established properties, that they could get the benefit of the city using some of our funds to help cover their costs.
Right.
Because there's a difference between a raw tract of land and, like, for instance, McMahon Estates, where they're established. It's not like you're going to knock down all the houses and put like 50 houses in where there were 20. So, I mean, that's a question I hadn't really thought about. I don't know, Jim, if you had asked Brian or those guys about how we would manage that, it'd just be kind of hard to pick up the cost of their project if they've never been contributing the sewer fee. I don't know.
And that's why I asked the question, because, this is a significant increase on the sewer side, especially. But the selling point to that, or the reason why people might be okay with that, is that it should lower their special assessments in the future as redevelopment happens. But we have some residents that might not be the case for, that are on septics today. And if they're not paying in, then I would assume that 10 years from now or 20 years from now or whenever it is, that's a special assessment. But maybe there's an opportunity there. It just popped into my mind as we were talking through it.
So one thing that I would comment on that, for those who are currently on septic, I've not seen it in our community, but I've seen it like in the city of Baxter. When they bring them in, they pay that full cost. They pay the cost of hookup. They pay the cost, whether it's water or sewer. And many of them will opt to either have it assessed, similar to the way we do sidewalks. But we could start, and I'd like to uncouple it from this discussion eventually, but if we were to look at that, that's something we might want to explore, because I like what Mrs. Fisk says. If we start collecting that now and we start escrowing those funds, we then can develop, basically start having them prepay to have that happen. And once it's prepaid, if we're half the cost or more is covered, somebody like President Dardis might be more willing to, or as a whole community there, come in, because they don't have to take such a heavy hit all at once. So I really like that concept of prepaying. But again, we would have to do some work and get into public.
I feel like there might be an opportunity there.
Yeah.
But I would still highly recommend that the individuals that are on septic be given an option. I don't see how, if you're not, you're not having a benefit in the services now, I certainly would not be in favor of making them that route.
Mayor?
Would not. Commissioner Olson, did you have some comments?
Yeah, I just had a couple comments about the water rates. Just to make it clear, we have 2 tiers, but that's just strictly for residential, correct?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
Our commercial and the multifamily, our apartments, they're still on a flat rate, $7 1,000. It's only on the residential, just in case somebody was listening and watching us and want to make sure that they're not going to get hit because they're over 20,000 gallons and they're a commercial facility.
Yes, and a quick comment on that. One of the reasons we don't up that to the higher tiers, because we pick it up in the base charge with the meter, understanding that they're going to be having a higher volume coming in, and so we pick it up in the base fee.
The consultant told us that a 6-inch meter costs about $3,500, and they probably require maintenance twice a year.
Correct.
Whereas the 3/4 to 1 inch costs about $185 a year, or for a meter of that size. So when you take a look at the 6-inch and the fee of $240, there's not only is it much more expensive to initially put it in, but there's also yearly maintenance required. Commissioner Simmons had another comment, please.
I'm over it already.
All right, thank you, Commissioner.
I have a comment.
Yes.
Commission President Dardis, I just wanted to kind of on the sewer versus septic. I think you're right. We would have to do an all or nothing. And I can see a lot of issues arising from people where because if we were to say you can choose, it's going to be really tough when the time comes to put it in, and all of a sudden somebody gets a huge bill for their sewer line and the neighbor goes, well, I was paying $9 a month, so I don't have to. So, I mean, I think we'd have to do an all or nothing on that, but that's a commission decision on how you would want to handle that going forward.
I'd like more data on that. Jim and the consultant, Ryan, you're online. I'd like more information on that.
Yes, sir.
I don't think we should tie that to this decision this evening.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's uncouple that right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think our city engineer would have a lot to weigh in on that as well.
We'll decouple.
Decouple.
Okay. I wanted to make a comment about Nexus and AE2S. This discussion, from my understanding from Commissioner Simmons and Commissioner Thorstad, there's been discussions over the years. And I think one of the things that's most critical that made the commission move forward with this is when we were having all of our special assessment meetings across the city. One of the things that the public continued to tell us, and we could bring back that data, is that they would prefer user taxes on things that they use rather than additional special assessments for everything. Now, the city has made a commitment that we're also through sales tax, we're going to buy down some of that special assessment cost, where the sales tax will pay 40% and the taxpayers will pay 60% of that. So the point being is that this discussion has been ongoing certainly since the time that Commissioner Olson and myself and Commissioner Jurdevig have been elected, but also prior to that. And if you'll recall that these were discussions that were being vetted right from the very beginning of my tenure here about whether or not our enterprise funds were self-sufficient, because North Dakota Century Code requires that. So this is a culmination of a couple years of gathering that data, visiting with department heads and the commissioners, all coming together. And, honestly, most of us are okay with what we have to do with water, other than probably the metering charges, but we were unaware of what those 6-inch meters cost. The sewer is another discussion because we're all a little bit surprised at that. But as Mr. Larson so capably pointed out, we can't even bond for sewer right now because we don't make the requirement for reserves. So ladies and gentlemen, I guess what I'm saying here is that this is a necessary evil of the growth that we've had and what we have to do in order to make our community whole. So any other discussion? Any other questions? Commissioner Thorstad.
Just a couple comments. Number one, and it's maybe no excuse for us. I mean, we haven't really adjusted rates very much over the years, at least during my tenure. We've only did sanitation, I think, once, and water when we started acquiring from Fargo. So, I mean, that's, no one's going to care much about that. But the fact of the matter is, I mean, I think people are going to accept a 3% adjustment each year going forward if we implement a plan and stay with the plan, instead of all of a sudden we're putting out fires when all of a sudden we find we're having struggles to pay our bills. That's kind of what we'll run into the sewer. And I'm just going to make the point, in my opinion, and Commissioner Simmons has been around too. We've thoroughly looked at different options for water and sewer and opted working out an agreement with Fargo. And in my opinion, I think we got a fair deal with Fargo. And John, correct me if I'm wrong, we're under no obligation to send them any water or buy any water. And at some point, if that's the decision of a future commission to create their own facility, they could do that. But it was the best and the quickest solution for us. And we got help from the state on some of those projects as well. I mean, they encouraged that. So all of a sudden people might complain that the sewer is, oh boy, Fargo's taking advantage of us. And that's, in my opinion, that's not the case. And I think from what I understand, our lagoon system would have to be expanded rather quickly again because of our city's needs. So none of us are going to like having a big jump in the sewer rates, but I think it's necessary. And I do like the fact that we are setting aside money to fund repairs and future needs, so that will at least take some of the edge off specials or however else it's funded. So it's the only comment I will make is, but I'm going to just say I'm certainly there's good people who aren't going to be too happy, but we need to stay on the program going forward and not, like, say, come down 5, 6 years down the road and say, oh, geez, we got to adjust this again, because big hits really bother people. Little hits, they don't like them, but at least then there's a plan and we're sticking to it.
With regard to Commissioner Thorsted's comments, I too have went through the analytics of the water and the sewer agreements with the city of Fargo. And with what the costs would have been for our own treatment plants, we're looking at $78 to $100 million. And those analytics, the contract negotiated by the previous commission with the city of Fargo was a very good deal. So I commend you guys on that. There's no question in my mind about that.
And one last comment, just to the citizens of West Fargo, we have no way to meter sewer water going out of our properties in town. It's once it hits the main pump going to Fargo, that's where it's metered. So we need to keep the rates down. We need to not dump extra water. And I'm talking particularly the sump pump, because that can pump a lot of water into the system. You wouldn't realize how much water that is. And at where are we paying, Jim? He said we're paying $3,000
a thousand. $3 a thousand.
That wouldn't take long to add that. So we need to be cognizant of those things. And I know that's something that's not addressed in the rates here. That's something that has to be looked at separate. But those kind of things we got to be cognizant of, is that it's unmetered, and the city as a whole, it's going to reflect in everybody's rates if we don't, we put excess water into our system.
Commissioner Simmons.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with Commissioner Thorsted. Back then, there's no way we could afford a water treatment center. And you got to remember back then also, wasn't the watershed district, but the watershed, whatever it was, chipped in a lot of money to help us make this move. In reference to what we're doing tonight, I've done a lot more studying over it since the last meeting. And my gut tells me we got to do this. I just think it's the right thing for our citizens and for us. I just got to make one comment. You picked a hell of a time to do it. That's all.
Yeah.
But I think we have to do it. I think we have no choice.
Thank you, Commissioner Simmons.
Can I make
one? Please, Mr. Larson.
So, thank you, President Ardis. Just to address Commissioner Zerdovic's comment about the cash rural and getting the data for them, I agree with him totally. We do need to do that. I'd like to just put a comment in that we would, if approved, we would work as fast as possible to get that brought in and start using that data to get the volumetric rates for water with them. But if we're not able to make it by the July 1st, we would just set an appropriate base rate and roll with that until we could get the volumetric data on that. But that was something I too had not realized until today, that we need to address that with the cash rural. So I appreciate that question coming up. Thank you.
That being said, there's going to have to be a lot of communication to the public about that. What's your pleasure?
President Ardis, in reference to what Mr. Larson had already talked about, we've met with Melissa Richard from Communications and talked about a detailed plan and how we plan to push it out quickly and efficiently so people can actually have calculators to figure out their bill and information. And we'll do a letter, we'll do all kinds of information just so we can keep people informed on what's happening, because not everybody watches what's going on here. And so just so that you know, it is first and foremost for us to make sure people are educated and understand. And with that being said as well, I want to thank Nexus A2S. I want to thank those guys, Ryan and those guys. They did an amazing job helping us. I really appreciate the work they did. And I want to thank Jim because he really knocked it out of the park, keeping an eye on everything and making sure it was 100% accurate and that everything was included that needed to be included. And Dustin for pulling in all the CIP stuff. It was great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Fisk.
Mr. President,
Commissioner Olson.
I'll make the motion to approve the recommended rates for water and sewer as presented.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Thorsted seconds. It's been moved and seconded that we approve the water and sewer rate recommendations as presented. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Larson. Thank you, Mrs. Fisk. Next order of business is the West Fargo Art Collective discussion. Malachi Peterson. Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, President Dardis. So a few months ago, we had a middle school art teacher named Ashley Smalley approach the city. She was looking for a way to paint a mural with some of her students, and this was all pre-COVID. And so due to that, some folks at the city, including me, Tim Solberg, Carissa Hansen with the library, and a few other folks got together and started talking about ways that we could encourage and promote public art within the city of West Fargo. We ended up forming a small informal group called ourselves the West Fargo Art Collective. And we had a few meetings which were led by community members, including Ashley. Staff members participating in the group now feel it would be prudent to formalize the group to better streamline the process for identifying public art opportunities and streamlining communication and processes for artists who wish to do projects within the city of West Fargo. We found that as an informal group, things were a little bit, I would say, confusing at times as far as what the process should be. So like if an artist came to the city and was like, hey, I want to do a mural, at the POW MIA Plaza, how do I do that? We didn't really have a process in place to help that person. And so what we're recommending today and what staff is recommending is that the city commission direct staff to work with interested residents and agencies on developing a recurring meeting and bylaws to form a public art advisory committee. This committee would be structured kind of similarly to the Planning and Zoning Commission or the Economic Development Advisory Committee. Probably more similar to EDAC than Planning Commission. And the fact that it would be made up of a group of interested people and stakeholders, not city staff, who would then be around to help either recommend projects to be done on city-owned property, or would be able to help direct artists in the process that they can go about doing art on their own property. The Planning and Zoning Department's planner specializing in community development, i.e. me, would act as the staff contact for the Public Art Advisory Committee. The planner would work with other city departments, including the Communications Department and Library Department, as well as the Economic Development Department, because we have a new Economic Development Director. And we would work to provide resources and opportunities to the committee. And then we would also connect private individuals and groups to the information and resources they need to produce art within the city. That is all I have. I'm here for questions, and Tim is also here too, in case I can't answer anything.
Thank you. Question for Mr. Peterson or Mr. Silver?
I have one, Mayor.
Commissioner Simmons.
Thank you. Is this just an advisory committee? Is that what you're asking for?
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. So
it would still come to the commission?
It would for projects that would be on city property. So we were thinking, so along the same lines as how Fargo has their Public Art and Culture Commission, and then Moorhead also has a Public Arts Committee. I believe their committee is about 7 members. They're doing like a call for artists, so sort of like the electrical boxes that are in the downtown Fargo area. So those went through a call for artists, and that went through the Public Arts Commission and Culture Commission, which then went to the City Commission. And then, of course, the Arts Partnership was helping them out too.
And the appointment of those committee members would be administered by Planning and Zoning?
I believe so. We haven't really talked a whole lot about that just yet.
I know that when I've met with the arts people that, you know, Mr. Solberg was in the room, you were in the room, Mr. Peterson. So there's going to be a lot of people trying to point themselves to this if we don't have some type of administration. And then it's going to become cumbersome, in my opinion.
I believe the city commission should appoint the members. We have a couple of people that are interested in being on it. We want to work with them to make sure that we don't do this and have a huge committee, and also don't have people that maybe want to be on there just to get their name out there, things like that. So we got a little bit of work to do.
All right, very good. Thank you, Mr. Solberg.
So what you're looking for is just to set up the bylaws and all that, which the commission will eventually approve.
Yep, basically just to have the blessing of the commission to move forward with this process. Staff have already dedicated some of their time to this over the course of the last month or so, but we feel, you know, in order to move forward, we sort of need your guys' approval for it so we can do more with it.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, Mr. Jeremy, please.
I love the idea, and I just wanted to give some kudos to Ashley. I had coffee with her probably over a year ago, and because she sent me an email and had some great ideas around this, and I forget if I connected her with you, Tim, or with yourself, Malachi, but we wouldn't even be where we're at today if she hadn't kind of pushed some ideas and concepts with various people. So I think she's definitely somebody we want involved with this.
Most definitely.
Yeah, we're trying not to ruin it by being all unfavorable. So we kind of want to let them ride or start the ship off on the right path, but we need we need credibility from your kind of action.
So we're looking for a motion to establish the West Fargo Art Collective Advisory Committee.
I would be willing to make that motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Jurdevig. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Thorstead, seconds. Been moved and seconded for the City of West Fargo to approve the West Fargo Art Collective Advisory Committee. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you.
Thank you, commissioners.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Item number 8, the firm, 3044 Cheyenne Street. Reduction in parking and deviation from the Zero Foot Setback requirements. Mr. Solberg.
Thank you, Mr. President. 2 items that are of request tonight so that the firm can get a building permit. They have started some groundwork there, but there's a couple items that I need within the downtown mixed use district and the off-street parking requirements for consideration by the city commission in order to authorize a permit. First is parking. The city does allow for a reduction in parking. We have a couple of different means to which a developer can justify that. IT parking generation manual is generally where we look. We do have a new manual called shared parking that we use as well. The uniqueness of this site is that there's adjacent parking at Pioneer Place that provides for primarily the coffee shop, but also some office users within there. That parking may be used to provide the shared parking to help justify this, as well as another parking lot that Epic is looking at demolishing the Berg Auto Building and would have that complete by the time the firm would open. That provides a number of spaces, 29 additional spaces, along with 18 spaces at Pine Place for some shared parking. There is also 11 spaces on site. That coupled with the recent approval of the downtown Bell Bank redevelopment project, which would provide 300 additional off-street parking spots, and the Cheyenne Street project, which right now I don't have a count on what we're going to get for off or on-street parking availability there, but it will be increased. Provides staff enough, at least, to recommend approving the request, primarily with a condition that something be done prior to removing that site at Berg Auto. So if they were to develop that site at Berg Auto, we'd have to make sure that we either have that parking garage built or those additional on-street parking spots at Cheyenne Street. In addition to that, they're also looking at a deviation from the 0 foot setback along the downtown mixed use district. And we actually wrote into that ordinance the ability to do this deviation. The requirement for that deviation is where that usable space is proposed for dining areas, public arts installation, or plaza space. Within the memo, I provided a comment from the developer on what they plan to use that additional space for. They want to have additional area out there where they can have patio space. They have on the screen that I'm showing, these where my hand is at here on the screen is 2 garage doors that open up, and they would have some patio space there. That would not interfere with what our requirements are for how the streetscape is built. So there will be free open space for walking, a 6 foot open space, as well as space for trees, and then also a safeguard for parking. So tonight I have 2 recommended motions for the commission. First, prepare a resolution accepting the reduction in parking as provided in section 4-450 of city ordinances. And the second is to accept the applicant's proposal for a deviation from the 0 foot setback as provided for in the downtown mixed use district. The text is written in that memo, and I'm available for any questions. I believe Epic is on the line as well if you have any questions of them.
So my first question, Mr. Solberg, the 2 garage doors that opens up for the patio space. And maybe this is for Mr. Shockley. Can they then serve alcohol out there on that patio space?
That's going to depend upon what there is included in their liquor license application. We did make adjustments to the ordinance to allow certain areas to be included, but without knowing what's in their application offhand, and they may be able to include it.
Mayor? Thank you. Just a quick comment here from years past when we envisioned this. Our envision was definitely to have like tables out there and like a nice, wine and whatever outside their establishment. I mean, that was kind of our whole downtown vision, to be able to have this type of stuff. So, I mean, I'm Commissioner Thorsten. If you remember years ago, this is kind of what we talked about doing.
Yep.
President Dardis?
Commissioner Thorsten, you were going to make a comment? Please.
I will. Just question, Tim, what are the upper 2 floors? Are those apartments or offices?
Those are apartments, 1 bedroom and studio apartments are proposed up there.
So are they going to be expected to park over a block and a half away until the parking ramp gets built, if it ever gets built?
Yes.
That'll be interesting.
Mrs. Fisk, you had comments.
Yes. Now you made me forget what I was going to say. In relation to this building and, oh my gosh, you're going to have to bypass me. My mind went blank after listening to Mr. Commissioner Thorstad. I'm like, I had a really good comment for you and I can't remember what it is right now. So.
All right.
It was with the vision, Tina. About the vision, probably, with what we had vision down there.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Simmons. It goes back to the liquor ordinance. Actually, the liquor ordinance now allows for you to, as long as it's within the property that you own, even if it's outside of your building, you can file, we have a form. You just turn in a form and you say, I want to use this space at this time for these periods of time, like all summer, whatever, for outside, alcohol consumption, and it has to be approved by the Liquor Control Board. So as long as it's within their own property, that's already within our ordinances to allow that.
So this area, Tim, is not on the city.
Yeah, so they're asking for a deviation from the 0 foot setback. So if they were to have not had this deviation, those garage doors would have spilled out into the right of way. So they're asking for a deviation to push the building back a little bit so that they're not spilling out into the right of way. So they could presumably, within that liquor license, you could require some sort of screening or something if you wanted to, or roping or whatever, and that would be a separate discussion.
While attending a commission meeting years ago, before an elected official, was there not a request by other Cheyenne Street businesses not to be at where they're at now, and they were declined?
So our previous ordinance was the Cheyenne Street overlay that also had a 0 foot setback. There have been some that were denied that, and some where we looked at those properties and allowed deviation from it. What we wrote in because of that, and because of that sort of rigidness of the previous ordinance, we wrote this specific provision into this ordinance to allow for the deviation as long as it was usable space. I think of properties like if you're in downtown Fargo, for instance, and if you were to have one large massing of wall there, you may not have a lot of interest. So you may want to have some deviation here and there, not a major deviation, but some deviation so that you can create some interesting places. So that's where we leave the onus on them to provide that detail of what they're going to do. If there were to be a approval tonight, I don't know if I wrote it as clear enough in here, but I think our approval should be based upon that they're actually going to use it for something, that it not just be a deviation because they want it for how they design their building.
Mayor?
Commissioner Simmons, yeah.
Thank you. If I could, I know Timmy, exactly, because we did the exact thing at Choice Financial. We deviated a little bit so they could have what's in front of their building, whatever, that bench or whatever. We deviated a little bit from that, but this is, in my eyes, kind of a whole different story, because they actually, from my understanding, they want to be able to have a business that can kind of come out the front, the garage doors, and actually do business on that portion. Myself, I think that's a great idea. So, but.
Any other questions for Mr. Solberg? Again, as Mr. Solberg stated, we have two issues on this item, number 8, regarding the firm. We have the reduction of the parking is one item, and the other one is the deviation of the setback is the other item. So we'll take them one at a time. If you, as commissioners, you have thoughts on that.
I'll make the motion to approve the reduction in the parking requirements as
Second.
presented in there.
Commissioner Olson moves, Commissioner Simmons seconds that approval of the reduction of parking spaces. Is there any further discussion? I'm concerned, Mr. Thorsted's comments were in general terms about this, that, this is really dependent upon the Bell Bank and the completion of the parking ramp there. We're going to continue to have issues with parking in downtown West Fargo until those parking ramp floors are finished. I am very concerned about a reduction in parking spaces.
Yeah, I'm to follow up on that a little bit, I was just looking at the map. I could, at least in the near term, until that parking ramp is in, I could see that 4th Avenue West, kind of west of the alley there. Is people using that and spilling off into Morrison a little bit? Just because that's a half block walk versus a block and a half if they're thinking Berg. So near term, there's probably going to be some consternation in that area. Long term, if they get the ramp up and stuff like that, it probably alleviate it. But so I'm indifferent on it, not knowing for sure those other projects are going in. But I guess I'd probably put faith that they will be going in.
Mr. Sober, do you have, or a discussion, or Mrs. Fisk, any knowledge about when the Bell Bank project might initiate, when it's?
I can say some, and then I'm sure others know as well. Their plan is to, the Bell Bank site on Cheyenne 32, where our Plaza, the Lights is at, that will be done, I believe, this fall. And then they plan on moving into that space, Bell Bank does. And then demolition will start, I believe, either this fall or winter for the Bell Bank building and construction. So they're moving forward at a good pace.
How long,
Mr. Olson.
how long do they predict that it'll take to build the firm?
Amy Haas is on here from Epic, and between her and Commissioner Simmons, they would know. I would prefer to have her answer to that. I can guess and I can tell you, but it might not be accurate, so.
Mrs. Haas, are you on?
It doesn't sound like it, Mayor.
Commissioner Simmons.
I don't know. I don't, recall the exact date on the firm, but Tim, I do believe that doesn't the developer own a lot they purchased on the north side of the alley wasn't that? I thought that was going to be used for parking purposes for this project. Didn't they buy Tina a lot on the north side?
Again, I would have to have Amy make a comment to that, and she's here. She's just trying to get connected.
Okay. I'm very confident, commissioners, that Epic will do this right. I have no reason not to, that they'll get us extra parking if we need it. I'm not too worried about that.
President Dardis, she is on now, and Commissioner Simmons.
Ms. Haas, please. Can you give us a construction schedule of the firm?
Hi, this is Brian from Epic. Can you hear us?
Yep.
Okay. What was the question? Sorry.
What is your construction schedule of the firm, and when you start on the Bell Bank properties?
So as of right now, the construction schedule for the firm is we've just started doing our demolition, getting the site prep. There was an old foundation that was left over in there that we've gotten out. So we'll be able to get going on the build of the firm, which is a lot smaller building than we've done in the past, and without quite as much space that it'll need to be taken up. We'll be able to be done in that 12-month range at the longest, I think, in that situation. And then as far as getting going on the Bell site, it really is going to focus on getting them into their new space in southwest West Fargo there at the Lights, and then getting going on their space. And that will be about a 15 to 18 month build on that, because that's quite a bit larger project.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions, commissioners, of this gentleman?
I do, Mayor.
Commissioner Simmons.
Thank you, Brian. I don't know how long you've been on, but there was a little concern about the parking downtown. I know that you're going to allow the Berg Auto parking there, but I'm just wondering, didn't you purchase a lot on the north side of that back alley behind the firm? Where did you purchase an individual lot back there, where I thought there was going to be parking as well?
We did purchase two lots. There was a duplex and a blue house that's in pretty rough shape back there. So we bought that for two reasons, possibly converting into parking, which, to just convert something into surface parking isn't always, I think in everybody's opinion here, isn't probably the best use of the space, but we've got them there in case we need them. If we can't quite satisfactorily, basically appease all our clients, we can do that. And so we do have the ability to make use of those spots for parking if we need it.
So if for some reason here we get to the point where we feel we need more parking, am I hearing you that you're acceptable to talking about that and making one of those, even if it's short term?
Oh yes, absolutely.
So
Tim, would that be acceptable to planning and zoning in our ordinances? To put a
Actually,
surface
if you're asking,
parking lot in the neighborhood?
we'd have to rezone it to downtown mixed use or commercial if it isn't already. That's the first I heard of that one. But if you're asking my opinion, surface parking in downtown is contrary to the vision of downtown. So I would prefer we don't do anything too permanent there if we can help it.
I was just talking temporary in case we needed something.
Yeah, we've done that before. We've done a lot of temporary parking in case a new user comes in or just for a backup plan.
Tim, could you restate again how, with the reduction of parking, how many spaces are they asking that they reduce?
Well, if you accept that the shared parking of the Pioneer Place provides at least a bump here, it becomes a little bit more difficult. If you're saying that it doesn't, then they're asking for a reduction of 13 spaces.
But they're requesting shared parking, correct?
We're using that in our calculation to
So that's
determine
part of
whether
our
or not it
motion.
would be okay.
Thank you, Mr. Silbert.
I think Commissioner Thorstead has some good points.
Commissioner Thorstead, do you have a comment?
No, I don't have a comment. I'm just, again, my concern is the near term until some of this other stuff comes online, that they start parking over in those residential areas because that's closer.
Yep.
And people in Morrison, sounds like maybe they bought one of the corner houses there or something, so that eliminates some consternation there. But I don't want to see them parking over on Morrison. But the thing will affect them if they're apartments. I guess if I'm going to rent an apartment, I have to walk from Berg's location over. I'm not going to rent an apartment there. So I understand they have to look at it from that perspective as well. But that'd be my only concern is the spillover into that neighborhood. We're trying to work with those neighbors over there, and we all know they've had some challenges with the progress over the time here. So looks like there'll be a solution, hopefully, when that Bell project is done and stuff like that. But there's probably enough spots there to serve the residents. It's just when they have friends over or whatever.
Commissioners, this is, sorry to interrupt. This is Amy Haas. May I say something about the parking?
Certainly.
I was just going to mention that one thing we have found with our current apartments in downtown West Fargo is that our tenants prefer to have a nicer interior unit than they care about parking. We have quite a few, units in the Fargo, Moorhead, West Fargo area, and we're truly finding that with the clients that we're getting, more of the millennial type, walking to their unit is not an issue. They are more concerned about what their interior is like. So just wanted to make that comment.
Thank you. Commissioner Simmons, did you have another point you wanted to make?
No, I was just going to say that I think Amy wanted to jump in there so I could hear her in the background.
Yeah. Again, we're going to break this down into two different motions. So what's your pleasure?
I think there's already a motion on the table, wasn't there?
On the parking, yes, on the parking there is.
Reduction of the parking. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor of the reduction of parking at Cheyenne, 344 Cheyenne Street, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Aye. Motion carries. Next order of business is the deviation of the setback discussion that Mr. Solberg shared with us.
I'll make a motion to accept the setback.
Commissioner Simmons moves to accept the deviation of the setback. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Jurdovic seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the deviation of setback as presented by Mr. Solberg. Is there any further discussion?
Just one question. If a bar restaurant does not become a tenant there, does that cause any problems for us with that deviation to the setback? Or don't we care?
Thank you, Commissioner Olson, for the question. Mr. Solberg.
In my opinion, your acceptance of the deviation is based upon what is provided by the applicant. So yeah, I think it would be an issue. So if it is an office user, then you would expect that they also use that for some patio space then as well.
Because I've seen in other cities where they've got a wrought iron fence that goes around and blocks that area off because that's their property versus the city's property. So is there any way we put that kind of condition into it that because of that, no matter what kind of usage ends up being in that space? Or is that something later on, Tim?
Well, it's hard for me to say exactly how they should draw this up as some sort of landscape design. We like to leave some sort of creativity to the applicant or the tenant.
Right.
Well, and that very well might be something that the Liquor Control Board requires, is some kind of definition of that outside space to approve a liquor license as well.
If it's a coffee shop, for instance, you probably don't want that fence up there. You probably want people to be able to just sit down in a table or something like that. So I think there could be a few different users, but you really want it to be some sort of livable space that attracts people to the area.
Sure.
So I think the way that they wrote it is probably generic enough that it could translate to other users.
I was just curious because in your proposal, it's a restaurant bar tenant. Well, if it changes, then have we done something we shouldn't have?
Yeah, I think I would maybe recommend then, if I could, Commission President, that my number 2, where I state that for dining area of their proposed restaurant bar tenant, that somehow we state in there that whatever the tenant may be, that it should be used as some sort of public space.
Very good. Is that acceptable to the second?
Yes.
And the person that made the motion?
Explain that again, Tim, please.
Well, I'm trying to leave it a little bit open-ended, but I want to make sure that that space isn't just bare and not used, that it should be used for some sort of open space.
Okay.
The comment was pretty generic, but it kind of intended to be generic.
Okay. Good enough. I'm okay with that.
Thank you, Mr. Solberg. Is there any additional discussion?
This is Brian from Epic again.
Yes, sir.
To Commissioner Olson's point, I agree with what he's saying, and we will make sure that space stays open to the public and isn't blocked off in any way where it couldn't be spilled out and used by the public.
Thank you, sir. Any further discussion? All right, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor of the deviation of the setback signify by saying aye, please.
Aye.
Aye.
All right, opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Next order of business is item number 9, construction report. Mr. Scott.
Thank you, Commission President Dardis, members of the commission. I'll be brief. Really not a lot to report on. There are some minor lane closures on some of our large roadways. Cheyenne Street, we've got some corrective work being done. So there's some periodic lane shifts and closures. 32nd Avenue, still have a lane closed there. We also have a lane closed on the north side of town up at 9th Street Northeast from Main to 7th. But again, really not a lot of, call it dramatic activity to report on. So I guess if anything, I'll open up for questions if there's anything specific.
Questions of Mr. Scott?
I have one.
Commissioner Olson.
I was on 40th Avenue this morning near the water tower, and I noticed there's a lane closure there. It looks like the owners at 225 Cheyenne Street or 40th Avenue is building an approach onto 40th.
Making it out.
Correct, Commissioner Olson. The Accelerated Greenworks site, this was reviewed and approved by the City Commission, I think back in February, where you approved a land use change to commercial for a tree or a tree nursery. So yes, they are. There is some activity there. I believe they did set up some traffic control last week, and yes, the intent is to build a new driveway that will be a little further west than the existing driveway. The existing driveway was a 12-foot wide asphalt section that was really close into the functional area of the intersection. So they do need to build a new driveway further west that will basically allow us to control their access as a right in, right out. Whereas today it's beyond the median, so people can turn in and out of there. So they do need to do this work over the next, I think, week or two.
And Thank you. The other access onto 40th is going to come out, the existing one.
That is correct, Commissioner President.
Yep. Anything else for Mr. Scott? Questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Next order of business is the City Administrator's Report. Mrs. Fisk.
Good evening, Commission President and Commissioners. It's been a long meeting, but a good one, so I won't keep you too long. I just want to kind of update you on a few things. Tomorrow and Wednesday, we will be having the virtual police chief interviews for the top 10 candidates that we had. We had a really good selection of candidates, but we are going to do a virtual interview to narrow it down to the top 2 or 3, and then we will be bringing those forward for another set of interviews that are more in person and giving you guys the opportunity to meet the individuals and get to know them a little bit, as well as the police department staff, to get to meet them and get to know them and all those types of things. So I will be sending out a outline of how we plan on doing this and who's involved in what, so that all of you are fully aware of how we plan on moving forward. We have Police Commissioner Jaravig involved. We have Commission President Dardis involved, and we have Commissioner Simmons involved directly with some of it, and then the rest of you are all included as far as the meet and greet, so that we can have everyone included. So that is moving along. The executive assistant is moving forward. That closed, Courtney's position. We had 90 applications for that job.
Wow.
Yeah. And so thankfully, Jenna went through them all for me and pulled out the qualified applicants and sent me a list. And so her and I will be meeting on Friday to go through everything and make a determination on when we will do our interviews and how we will do our interviews for that position. So I'll keep you posted on that. Next Monday, we are closed for Memorial Day. So not that you can find staff that often anymore, but if you're looking for staff, we're not there that day. I also wanted to bring up, let me see. Oh, Melissa informed me that she needs 2 commissioners, if you're available this Thursday at 2, to go through the street fair vendors and help make a selection, because she's creating a selection committee. So if 2 of you would be interested, she would be very appreciative.
My hand goes up.
Okay. Anyone else?
Already.
I did.
I can do it.
Brad? Okay. Okay. All right. So Mark and Brad. Sounds fantastic.
I got voluntold.
Yeah, voluntold. I thought you're the one who responded. Did you not
I
respond?
think it was the mayor. I think it was the mayor.
Oh, sorry, Bernie. Okay, we'll do Bernie.
I don't mind getting bumped. That's all right.
Oh, that's fine. Go ahead, Bernie.
Yeah, yes. Thanks, Bradley.
I got a meeting. I got a MetroCog meeting that afternoon anyway.
Okay. Well, perfect. Another important thing is the CIP. I know you guys have been waiting for it. We want to continue to, our plan is to bring it to the first meeting in June now. We want to meet with each and every one of you and allow you the time to go through the minute details. We'll send it out, let you look at it, ask questions, and then we'll bring it to the June meeting with a presentation for the public and yourselves as well. It will include policies on reconstruction and how we would use our sales tax dollars to help aid some of the reconstruction processes, and a bunch of other minute details, but as well as major details. So it's very comprehensive, and I've got to say that Dustin has knocked it out of the park. He did a really great job on it, and Jim's assistants, Jim did a great job as well. They worked very, very hard on it, all of them, and I can take no credit other than I looked at it, told them my thoughts. So that we will be contacting you guys in the next week or 2 and meeting with you so that you can ask the questions you need to ask before we bring it forward for a recommendation for the public. Let's see. I thought I had one more thing for you. The special assessment policy is about complete, and we'll be bringing that forward as well. And then the Special Assessment Commission, just for you guys had approved the bond issue that included 14 different districts quite a while ago. With COVID happening, it kind of threw everything off for the Special Assessment Commission. So we will be setting those meetings up in the next month or 2 and having that start so that we can have everything ready and in place by the October deadline. And if you want details on that, John is available to tell you the process, but it takes a little time, and this time it's going to take a little longer because we're going to do a lot more education, a lot more notices to the public, things like that, as a result of our special assessment forums that we had last year. So other than that, that's all I have. What do you have for me?
I do have a question.
Commissioner Olson.
Since you mentioned COVID and the street fair, how are we going to meet the CDC recommendations on gatherings and all that kinds of stuff, with the Red River Valley Fair being canceled, the state fair being canceled, all that? I just want to make sure that all of that's being taken into consideration, whether we continue that this year or we just put it on hold till next year. And then same thing with cruise night.
Yep. Well, for your information, Melissa could probably give more details if you want more details, but they've already canceled the May cruise night. They're looking at canceling the June cruise night just because there's so many people that gather there. It's impossible to do the social distancing and to have the, sanitizing the bathroom areas and all those types of things. The rest of our events are kind of hit or miss depending on how things go for our county and our area. We've talked about things like the rest of the cruise nights. We've talked about the street fair, which has been moved now to August. Talked a little bit about West Fest and how to manage the parade, because when you get 20,000 people piled in a street, if things aren't clear and defined by that time, that could be an issue. So as staff, we're working really hard on how to manage social distancing and still try to have events. But we'll be bringing different information to you as things go forward on whether or not we're even able to hold them, or if it's appropriate to hold them. So that information will come forward to you guys. Thank you, Commissioner Wilson. That's a good question.
Great question.
Any additional questions from Mrs. Fisk, Mr. Jurdovic?
Oh, I would just add on to what Commissioner Olson stated. I mean, I think I would also throw in there all of the of events that we are paying a considerable amount for each month through West Fargo events. Like the longer we taking a month-to-month approach with our event strategy means that we basically spend all the money in planning and with outsourced contractors in the case of West Fargo events to do this, and then we cancel events. Where if we could be more proactive and decide, I mean, if the decision were there's no way to do this safely over the course of the summer, if we canceled them all, we would actually save some taxpayer dollars.
Commissioner Simmons.
Well, I was just going to say, I think the approach we're taking, honestly, with the month-to-month is good. I've been involved in all of it, even as far as cruise night go, we're going month-to-month with them. But the one thing we have to remember is just because we cancel them doesn't mean there's no money paid, no staff time put into it. There's still revenue that we're not collecting, so we're going to have to make up for that anyway. I mean, it's not like if we cancel everything, we would not save all of this money. So,
but we could save a lot of it.
Well, hopefully. I mean, I hate to cancel something 3 months out, and then all of a sudden the governor opens us up wide open or whatever, or it's.
Yeah, but I don't think we should make our decisions based off of solely what the governor does either. I mean, I think we have to. I mean, that's what we have to look at a little bit differently.
We have a West Fargo events meeting on Wednesday at 4:00, and Commissioner Jurdovic will share your insight with the committee at that time. Just for public information, I don't know if you're aware of this or not because they haven't listed it, but I am on the Cass County COVID task force. I was appointed by the governor, so just so you know that. So I get 3 updates by the healthcare professionals and public health a week. I get a public health update 5 days a week.
It's okay, I'm not muted or anything. I just don't know what to do with them. And it's wonderful that Bernie's on that board and able to gather that information. He forwards it and it helps us as staff. We're constantly working on our return to work plans and our situational plans and how we're going to move forward. And Melissa has some great contacts with, I can't say the name of it. It's a health coalition that's in the area. And we plan on utilizing their services to help us make sure that we're not underreacting or overreacting on return to work plans and having people back into City Hall and customers in City Hall. So it's very important, the work that's being done. So thank you very much.
And commissioners, if any of you have contacts within our community of businesses that are concerned about their population and infections or whatever like that, please feel free to call me. And I have the state contacts information where we'll have some of the either public health or Department of Commerce people visit with them directly. I had one of those today. The Inquirer has 200 employees in his plant, and we put him in contact within 15 minutes of the Commerce Department head of it. And, so we'll be as reactive as we can possibly be, and I can help you with that. Anything else for Mrs. Fisk?
Just one other question, Mayor, or maybe Tina, or any insight into whether or not the governor or anybody's going to open it up for testing for everybody, or is it going to be pretty much if you need it or if you have it, you're getting tested?
At the present time, the testing strategy in Cass County, because of the amount of infection rate that we have here, is going to continue to go after those targeted areas. areas that we know that we have infections in, and then identify them by social tracking as to who they've come in contact with, because we have to isolate the carriers. Give you an example. The West Fargo business that called me today doesn't have any active cases in his plant, but he has people that have tested positive and they're asymptomatic. So they don't know they're sick, but they're there. And the reason they found out is because their spouses tested. And so all of a sudden, asymptomatic carriers in a plant of 200 will end up being just like the wind generation, the GE plant up in Grand Forks.
Mhm.
That's the potential of it. And that's the focus of what we're trying to do in Cass County, is we're looking for the active cases because we know we have a high infection rate, whether it's symptomatic or asymptomatic. We're looking for it. Many of the other counties aren't looking for active cases, but because of our infection rate, we have to look for the, because it's going to continue to get worse in Cass County if we don't.
Good. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Correspondence, Mrs. Fisk or any of the commissioners?
I had emailed out today 2 letters that you had forwarded to me, President Dardis. One from Alex Voorhees, I don't know how to pronounce the last name, about wanting chickens. And then another thank you from the Fargo Moorhead Opera because we support the Arts Council. So those have been emailed out to you, and that is all I have.
Alex had sent me an email first, and I encouraged him to write a letter to the commission. So, Tina, I'm glad you shared it with the commissioners. That he thinks it'd be really good for us to allow chickens in their yard. So, are there any non-agenda items the commissioners would like to bring forward at this time? Are there any non-agenda items that staff would like to bring forward at this time? No? Anything for the good of the order? Anybody has? Thank you for your patience this evening. It was a long meeting. Commissioner Simmons.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Commissioner Olson.
I second the motion.
It's been moved and seconded. We adjourn. We stand adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
The recording has stopped.